We'll just need a bigger one.
Wow.
That's why if you drive down Albuquerque on that side of the road, I put a sprinkler system in last year, just so we can get that greener, and planted those trees.
Nice. So you have a lot of excess water from the quarry.
Yeah, we have plenty of water.
Any like street lights or anything?
Yeah, there'll be some lights, we'll be putting lights in, inside the development. Probably, I don't think any on Albuquerque, but at the intersections and inside the project a little bit.
Will the units have like decks on the back?
They'll have a small deck, similar to what we have right now, just a small deck.
So for the ones in front of Albuquerque, those will be on the rear side, opposite Albuquerque.
They'll be on the
Right.
rear side.
Okay.
Everything that's on Albuquerque will have, the front door will be facing Albuquerque.
So
And
that-
everybody will
okay.
enter the unit from the back door, or they'll have to walk all the way around the house if they want to go in the front door, but have to walk all the way around the building.
So that back is almost like a service drive.
It's what?
It's almost like a service drive.
Yeah, that's what it is. The back, the road in the back, yep.
And everything will be ground floor units, they're not gonna be raised backs, all that, so
Nope.
just be,
Nope.
just like what you have at
Just
California.
what I have right now.
What about the parking for the 16-unit building? That's in the back of the building?
That's in the front and the back.
Okay,
It's got one row in the front, one in the back.
okay.
Well, I think it looks great. I mean, I think it, it looks pretty good. In terms of,
We have a long ways to go, but it's just
Yeah,
kind
no,
of
I know, it's a
just the
conceptual one.
beginning of the,
yeah, exactly.
but what I wanted to do the most is make sure we didn't have driveways off of or facing Albuquerque.
Right.
And I think we've accomplished that. With fence and trees and the trees that we've already planted out there and more trees, and it'll look pretty good.
I personally like the idea of having garages in the back. In New England, garages are almost a necessity.
Yeah.
And I think with the way that it's laid out, you really wouldn't even see them unless you drive into the service road or into the loop, you'll see them, but pretty well hidden.
I like the horseshoe road.
Hmm.
I think there's a value too in having a mix of housing types. And the commercial layout, I think, makes sense. I think it's very much kind of what, at least I was envisioning.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Is there visitor parking, or will folks be in the
Well,
back
so,
where the tenants are?
so wherever there's a garage, the unit actually has the garage plus 3 parking spots. So which are way more.
Yeah.
It's like, I was reading, we have 1.5. 1.5's not enough. It's just not. You need a minimum of 2. We have at Callaway Court, we have the same thing. We have 3 plus the garage, but everybody fills the garage up, so they have 3, and they're still not enough. It's really not, but where do you draw the line?
How wide is the loop road?
It'll be paved 24 feet wide.
Okay, good.
Well, it'll all be built to the same standards. Everything will be built to the same road standards, parking lots, same pavement thicknesses, the gravel thicknesses, all that stuff will be the same. It'll have town water, it'll have natural gas, which is a big plus, having natural gas. It's so much cheaper than anything.
In the event of
full parking, do you think visitors will be able to park on the side of the internal road?
Will the businesses be able to?
The visitors.
Oh, visitors? I think we have enough parking, but it's, 3 spots per unit, so, I mean, hopefully people get along a little bit, so if they can all park in there, I would hope.
Yeah, I'm assuming they won't be assigned, so,
Yeah,
yeah. That's a lot of parking, I think.
Yeah.
there's days it's not enough, but most of the time it's fine.
I noticed that there's drive into the retail that faces Charles Bancroft, right? And then let's say if you were coming home and you wanted to pick something up there, and then you had to go back out onto Albuquerque and then back into the neighborhood, would there be like a walking path that you could put between the neighborhood and that?
There- Well, we're gonna
back
build
of
it,
the retail?
so when we do this, we're required to build a sidewalk all the way down to Colby Road on 3A.
Okay,
So there will be a sidewalk all the way down to Colby Road.
okay, what I was referring to though was the folks in this community,
Yeah,
could they, on foot?
Oh, absolutely.
Walk all the way
yes,
around?
yes, everything,
Cut in the back?
all our units, everything that we do will have a sidewalk attached to it. So someone in the 16-unit building wants to walk their kids to the daycare,
Yeah.
they can walk their kids there.
Okay.
Everything will be tied in with sidewalks.
Will you have an additional sidewalk that's not alongside one of the roads to connect to the back of the commercial property?
There'll be a sidewalk on the loop road, going around the loop road.
Yeah.
But what about to just skip over the grass?
Yeah, everything will be connected. So wherever, probably a couple spots will connect the parking lot with, so if you look at the end of the 9,000 square foot building, there's a sidewalk there, right at the end, that's kind of just dark colored in pencil. There'll be a sidewalk from there that will go to the loop road.
Nice.
So everything will be tied in so people can walk. That's what we want to try to do.
And what's your plans for the remnants of Morgan Road?
That's not a town road. It's a private road. So it just got called Morgan Road because Sterling Colby and it got called that way back and with Sterling and Bill Colby, and it was Morgan Road, but it's not a town road. The
So
town doesn't maintain it or anything.
Are you planning on digging it up and rerouting the, like as shown here, rerouting the driveway to that house to the internal road?
Yes, we won't use what is called Morgan Road at all. That intersection's too terrible to add any traffic to that intersection. So the only people that'll be coming out Morgan Road when we're done is Romano's. That's it.
And if you want to get to Romano's from the units, you're probably gonna have to cross.
There'll be we can run a sidewalk to the edge of the property, or there'll be a sidewalk down the front to go to Colby Road, that somewhere's in the land, somewhere's in there.
Yep.
If you were on Colby Road and you came to the stop sign, the right-of-way actually keeps going straight right there. So that's probably where we'll bring the sidewalk, because when they built what's 3A now, so where Colby Road is, that used to be 3A. Then they built the piece from the south end of Colby Road to the north end of Colby Road is when they straightened that out way back and before my time. Or our times, probably.
And the money Charles Bancroft left behind.
So there's this little piece that there is it's old pavement there right now, but that's where we'll probably bring the sidewalk in somewheres there. So looking at this, it's just kind of, seeing that we can agree on that these documents that you're doing kind of all tie together. I mean, so you get an idea what we're trying to accomplish.
Mhm.
And I want your input too on what, you know, your thoughts, and as we said before. I think the only.
I think it looks great. I mean, I think, if we can sort of keep the rural agricultural feel
That's-
to it,
that's-
then I think it'll be good.
Yeah.
I think that's just
And
my.
that's gonna be in the design, the siding of the building and how we can make those look.
So yeah, with the parking garages, it helps that they are on the back relative to Albuquerque. Do you know how long those buildings are?
I think they're the same length, just about the same length of the building, so, I believe they're 60 feet long. I believe
Rose
that's,
Meadows, I would guess, right?
excuse me?
Like you see at Rose Meadows?
Same thing, identical. I think they're 60 feet.
Do you think?
72, sorry, 6 units, 12 feet apiece, 72.
Do you think it would be logical to, like, instead of having one long one, do like two smaller ones, or just style the building so it's not a very long thing?
Well, what I like about having the shorter ones, then we can hide the dumpsters in between them. So that's we have someplace to put the dumpsters, because we need dumpsters out there too. That's always a challenge where you're gonna put those so they're not an eyesight.
And architecturally, the design is such that they don't have this massive front face to them.
Yeah.
So it's not the old-fashioned ugly building that used to be constructed.
I was trying to think, the, like post office boxes or things like that, or are they gonna?
That's required by the post office, so if you drove by Rose Meadow, that's what they require now.
Okay,
That's not, it has to be inside a building like that, and it has to be set up like that.
Centralized, like, for everybody.
Yeah. But it has to be in a building.
interesting.
So we made that building a little bit bigger so that if there were kids, if it was raining, they could go stand in there while they're waiting for the bus. If they wanted to, however, or hoping too that the bus would pull in and make the loop. So we made it so that big enough so the bus could make the loop if there were kids there.
Buses go down private roads here?
You know,
I
they don't go down private roads, but they turn around wherever they want, however they want, when they want.
Wherever they can manage, right?
They turn around, our driveway at Continental Paving is a private road, and they turn around there every single day. So,
Okay.
it's I don't know, that's one of those things.
What do you think about keeping that kind of rail fence, the white rail fence?
Oh,
look?
absolutely,
Yeah.
I like that. That's a nice,
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
definitely nice.
yep.
Yeah.
No, we're
So
keeping
smart.
all that, that's all staying.
Good.
Yep. We want it to look rural.
because that provides a screen without being the screen.
Yeah,
And it does keep that rural look, so yeah.
And where where this is Colby Brook, you
Yeah.
have the floodplain, so that's all gonna be trees in there?
that's just staying the way
Staying
it
the
is.
way
It's a
it is.
field right now, so
Yeah.
we don't clear, other than up by the existing duplex,
Okay.
in a couple spots, we don't clear anything. Well, we have to take out some of the big trees. We're gonna save as many as we can up in the commercial area. As, you know, what we don't have to take down. We'll leave as many big trees as we can.
There's almost like a tree buffer there.
Yep.
Tree line there already.
Yep, there's a tree line up against Colby Brook.
Right.
Yep.
Thank you for giving us something to really look at and consider and ask a million questions on. It's very helpful.
Yeah, and, you know, as I said before, this is the first one, so,
Right.
you know, I want input, so.
Yeah.
I want, you know, if somebody doesn't like something, I'm not offended, I wanna hear it so we can talk about it and say, and at some point, we'll come in, we're a ways away from having a final plan, so we'll be in with, Jim will be coming in. We'll have some renderings of the buildings. We, discuss that, make sure you guys are happy with that. I don't, my gut feeling, it's gonna be more like the siding that's on the golf course. It's all wood siding, I believe, or that, they make a board, I forget what they call it. But it's what I put on the house that I moved across from where the gas station is, that same type of siding. So it's gonna have that look to it. That's my goal is. So that.
In terms of I don't know, we talked about like the post office boxes have to be inside, but, would you have doing us like in the middle of this little road, like a barn building or anything, or, I don't know what you were thinking, but.
We're not gonna have a clubhouse or anything like that.
Yeah, maybe that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, no, we don't, not our intention. Yeah, I don't think we'll be having that. But I think like the post office's box is probably gonna be closer to the commercial area, where that box would be. Up at that end. There'll be one building for everybody will be in there.
I don't know if you know, obviously, you're planning to have a daycare, but, is there gonna be like some daycares like an outside area?
Yeah, that's the bigger area that's
Okay.
opened up, that just looks like it's got a fence around it.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
okay.
what that is, that's
Okay.
a playground area.
Mhm.
Yep. And again, we have to get with people that do daycares and,
Yeah, that'll be a very convenient location for a daycare, just on your way to
Yep.
the north, just drop them off and keep going.
Absolutely.
and it's my intention to make that work, financially for whoever will run it, so that it's, cause I think it's a big need for it, and I think it's a need within the community and everything, so. If we'll be subsidizing that to some degree, to get it in.
What's that little, to the left of the fenced daycare, that little driveway and little box? What's that?
Next to the daycare?
No, across this.
Off the loop
across-
road, this one,
Off the loop road, yeah.
right here. Like it looked like it might be a large dumpster
Oh,
location or.
no, so Jim put in, that's where we're gonna, I believe we're gonna end up with another building there. That's a maintenance garage.
Okay.
So that's what that is, that's a maintenance garage, but I don't want the maintenance garage yet, that's why I said I'm gonna put it over, I'm gonna add on to
So
the
that'll be where your
garage.
additional units would be.
Right, that could be one more unit.
Yeah.
I think. But that's what's gonna go there, I don't want a garage there, I don't want people leaving junk outside.
I think the mailbox would be better back further, because you got a lot of turning traffic up here, and everybody's gonna have to go to the mailbox. Why not push it back interior?
Yeah, we can, it'll be in there, it's just gonna be behind the commercial units, that's my guess.
Yeah,
And there'll be a loop for them to pull in,
yeah.
just like drove by Rose Meadow,
Well,
the same
at
type
the
of thing.
beginning, yeah.
They can pull and grab their stuff, they're not stopping traffic. Same type of thing. The intention, anyway.
Speaking of Rose Meadow, when do you think the widening of 102 will happen?
We're gonna start, we're gonna be starting in about 2 weeks. We finally got a meeting with the state, it just takes forever. We got our approval, but getting a meeting, we had a pre-construction with the town, so that we're also town side, but getting the stake out there, we've been chasing him for 5 weeks.
Is Cutler Road to be the same time frame?
Excuse me?
6 and Cutler Road to be
Oh,
the
yeah,
same
everything
time?
was the same time. Yeah, yeah, it all happened at the same time. The telephone poles are already moved, so that part's done. We got that done last year, so that's pretty easy at this point.
Good.
And most of it's just 2-foot wide widening on 102, and then an overlay moving the crown of the road, so it's just pavement.
But Cutler's gonna decrease the elevation or something like that? So you don't have to look back over your shoulder?
For,
Like
no,
Cutler?
no, it's gonna come up to be a 90-degree,
Yeah.
90-degree intersection.
Yeah, I think it would be 90, and if I remember correctly, it'd be kind of flat. It's not gonna drop down immediately,
No.
Right,
flat,
cause
and
the
then
town owns a little
drop down.
piece to the,
Yep.
to the,
Yeah,
Forget if it's 1 or 2 car flat area before, when you're turning right or left or coming in.
Yeah.
And then it goes down.
then it'll go down.
Yep.
And then during the construction, I believe you said you're gonna shut off that end of Cutler for a while.
Yeah, we
and
have
people
to.
have to go through over by, Dr. Golis's office.
Yeah.
improvement, sure. The Rose Meadow's looking very good.
Well, I mean, there was, the trees are all in, they're supposed to be, because I'm going in the main road, it's gonna have trees up both, all the way, trees, but I just can't get them planted, don't have enough help. Trying to get other stuff done, but they're coming, they're there to be put in,
And then before Memorial Day.
Yep.
You always rain.
so.
Hey, you don't have to water them.
We actually, we lucked out, we dug 2 wells there. One well was 120 gallons a minute,
Well,
and the second one we drilled was 85 gallons a minute. So we have plenty of water to water the whole place.
But are the residents on Pennachuck?
The residents are on Pennachuck.
And that tie through to the other place
Yep.
too, behind?
Yep.
behind-
Yeah, it's just for the sprinkler system, because you can't afford it.
Yeah.
You can't afford Pennachuck for sprinkler system.
That's a water bill.
Speaking of trees, the ones along Albuquerque look nice too, the ones you guys planted
Yep.
last year. or
Yeah,
something.
last- yep.
But, yeah, I mean, once they really take
They
hold
start
and
coming.
start to,
Yep.
grow real strong, they're gonna look great.
Yeah, that's what we tried to do at Moore's Falls, but the power company killed us. We planted them all. That just kills me, because there's so much growth, the other side of the road, it's so much
They-
higher.
Yeah, they didn't,
We
now
just-
I'm worried about the sidewalk, because we have to get a hold of New England Power. Jason keeps trying to call National Grid, but it's New England Power.
It's both, I think.
Cause I looked at the tax assessing and it goes to New England Power, but I don't think they're gonna let us put that sidewalk too close to those poles.
No, but why don't you just make them put it in the right of way like we're doing, do the same thing?
Cause we don't wanna be on the outside of the fence.
It's gonna be on the outside of the fence, it's gonna be that way now, it's the right place to put it.
Yeah, the traffic
Me.
will be at 5 o'clock.
That's where it's gonna be now, I mean,
Well, on the east side, it won't be, you don't have a fence on the east side.
they're gonna put a curb in, you can have a grass strip in between it, there's so many things you can do. They should just put it,
We might have to,
they should just put it in the right of way.
cause Fish and Game won't let us pave it.
Yeah, just put it in the right of way and get it be done.
Check that out.
And, you mentioned Pennachuck, fire hydrants, are you
Oh,
gonna
yeah.
have hydrants
Fire-
in
yep.
there?
Fire hydrants, yep. Yep, everything will be,
Can we have those on the irrigation system?
excuse me?
Have the fire hydrants on the irrigation system
Yeah.
instead of paying the Pennachuck bill?
So if you notice the green fire hydrants at Passaconaway, those are hooked up to our sprinkler
Oh,
system,
really?
Ah.
I should-
but that only works in the summertime.
Yeah.
Anybody have anything else?
Do the garage structures have any windows on them?
No,
Okay, so the back will just be
Yeah.
siding.
yep, just siding, yep.
Do you think it would be reasonable to add a few windows to make it not look like a wall?
I can have them show some windows, the problem, they just line right up the same way, so, and the units being 12 feet, so maybe every other one we could do that.
And somebody has to wash the windows.
I was gonna say, I don't know if I'd want windows with my garage for people to be looking in.
And
So, I mean,
break
where
in.
you see these garages placed, the backs of them, as I understand it, are facing that interior
Yeah.
Yeah.
middle, right?
Yeah.
So the only people who are gonna see them, the backs of it, are if you're way over there driving in the loop.
Jared, this is
Or
what
if you're
is
running
currently at
around
Rose Meadow.
Grassier.
Yeah, I have the
And we can-
picture here, yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And we can, we can plant some, I'd rather plant some trees, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
For
that might
that.
make sense.
Some trees. to
Pretty up with
bring-
landscaping.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
some
mean, I
trees
think
and
the way
shrubs.
they're aligned, the way they're positioned, you won't,
Yep.
there's no reason to see the back of
Saw
them,
those on
you know, based on where
Yeah,
you.
I've seen them up there.
Yeah, landscaping would probably make sense.
I think landscaping and some berms and different things we can put.
Berms, you can do a lot with berms.
Okay, well, we thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. If there's things that that we can mention, if there's something you want, or if you come back, let me know, or thinking of. All right?
Couple years, so don't put the house for sale just yet.
No, this wouldn't even, we're not even we're gonna get this going, but we probably wouldn't even start construction till 27, to be honest with you. I wanna get Rose Meadow done, and then we'll start on this. We may build the commercial space first, and then build the units, is probably what's gonna happen.
Yeah. I was gonna say, do we have the ability to insist on that the commercial goes in first?
Well, it is
I think,
required.
well, it's gotta, financially, we have to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we
It's
set
negotiable.
that in the
I was gonna
regulations.
say,
In the
yeah, I
ordinance.
figured it was in there somewhere,
Or
but,
phased in some way, but yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
negotiable.
You do, you need to, absolutely.
oh, you'd be surprised. People like to put in the other
Yeah,
first
yeah.
and then say, oh gee, we're gonna forego the other.
No,
So-
We accounted for that in the ordinance.
The timing and phasing plan for both the commercial and residential portions of the development shall be submitted for approval by the planning board. We
Yep.
got this.
Yeah, no, you need to do that, absolutely.
Yeah.
And don't go away from it. You don't know how many times things were gonna get saved and things were gonna happen, and I remember where Wilson's is, right, there was remember the barn and the silo was there? They were saving that barn and they were gonna redo that. Soon as the plan got approved, there was nothing tied to it, they ripped it down instantly, it just happens too often. But anyway, seen too many things like that happen. Okay,
All right.
thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So, I guess, we will, we're still in our workshop. I guess I'll turn it over to Jay. Jay,
All
you
right.
wanna
So
chime in here?
I'm gonna start with the mixed-use guidelines. I was gonna run through everything again, because we kind of did do that last time, so maybe on a high level, but I was gonna focus more on the changes. But just kind of, very, very quick, overall, we start, I'm just starting at the top of the document, if you're following along, 120.15, just the general goals, the general requirements, which we talked about before. This really focuses on walkability, so the requirements of internal sidewalks around them, and kind of how to manage that. And it does have the garages, carports, parking lots, driveways should not be the dominant aspect of site design. Underground utilities where possible, and use open and recreational spaces as a community focal point. So that concept of the village green was really central. And then there are a couple of examples here of how to achieve that, and some of these are really pretty small. I don't want to keep going back and forth to the example that we had, but frankly, having a visual is helpful. So just looking at that visual, there's opportunities to achieve some of these types of spaces. Looking at the Loop Road, kind of the, I guess I would say southerly end of the Loop Road, you can see that there are some green spaces there, or spaces between the units, if you can see where I mean, that are not dissimilar from the examples. So it just kind of shows that even smaller spaces like that can be used in addition to that kind of larger central run. So there's different ways you could achieve these kinds of goals. And that was the intent of those examples. Moving on down to the layout requirements. So here is where we had a fair amount of discussion, both specific to Albuquerque, and just kind of this conversation around what happens when you abut more than one street. Now, realistically, that's Albuquerque, because now here we've seen a proposed solution, but I'll just go through the language. So previously, what it said simply was that residential buildings should have a primary entrance facing the public or private street that provides it with access. And the idea there being is to promote the sense of walkability, to promote the sense of community. But obviously we had some real concerns of, well, what about Albuquerque? That's a public street. How do you deal with that? So I added the sentence it should say buildings. For buildings abutting two streets, residential buildings may have a primary entrance facing either street. So that was just pretty simple. In that case, you have a choice. Clearly here, a solution was proposed to specifically address that, but it just allows you to have either. And then again, because we had a lot of conversation around Albuquerque and screening views from Albuquerque, I added residential buildings should be screened from view of Albuquerque Avenue to the extent practicable, probably possible, through the use of fencing, trees, shrubs, and or landscape berms as may be appropriate. So that's loose, but it does say you've got to do some sort of screening, but I think it makes it flexible enough where it could be a combination of things. So it can be that fence mixed with some landscaping. It could be putting in a berm if we felt that was necessary. So you do have to screen it in some way. I think there's flexibility in how you get there. Next, we just changed building shall to should. We had a lot of conversation around that setback. I didn't see that there was a lot. We didn't necessarily say change it, but I thought changing it to should from shall makes it's encouraged, it's not mandatory. And then again, it applies only to the right-of-way that provides the building with access. And again, clarifying no more than 20 feet from an internal private street that provides it with access. If we're going to go with a concept similar to what we saw here, where you have kind of two tiers of roads, which isn't something these regulations contemplated, but in this example, you essentially have what would be the primary access road, and then you have these kind of service roads. So that's just a question mark of, do we want to make a distinction as to some sort of hierarchy of road? That might be a thought, or maybe we don't. Right now, the way this is written, again, looking at this example, the drives that provide access to the units and to the garages would be considered a private street that provides it with access, and the buildings would need to face it, because Albuquerque is not the road that provides them access, and the garages would absolutely be an issue. So again, that's kind of a choice, but do we want to contemplate something different, or do we want to create a tier that says service road?
Or we could add wording for situations where the visibility from the rear is important. You may locate it in front instead, which would only apply to Albuquerque.
Right. I guess that's the other thing, because I think realistically, there's always the possibility that somebody's going to build a public street. But realistically, the only street we're talking about is Albuquerque. So maybe we just deal specifically with Albuquerque, which would not be unusual in the town's regulations, because Albuquerque is a distinct thing. So we might just want to, in this example, say Albuquerque and provide that exception.
Yeah, well, no matter what, we encourage more of a clustering of housing, and that's going to result in the possibility, or I think most developers are going to want to have an internal road and build off of the internal road. So even if it's a different property, we may have a public road that we don't want it to look too ugly from. So we have to be careful about that. Like the other lot that could be developed in the future is the one off of St. Francis Way. And it's like there's not a ton of frontage on St. Francis Way, which is there's the public part of what looks like the public part of St. Francis Way, and then the private part of St. Francis Way. I wonder how much visibility from St. Francis Way will matter, or will it not?
Is St. Francis Way a public or a private
I was
road?
wondering, I thought it was private, but I could be
It's
wrong.
possible. I can't click on it in the GI. If I click on it in the GIS software, it doesn't show anything. But there's definitely a private portion.
Right. We can double check that. Even, we can also keep language referencing to, properties that abut two right of ways and still single out Albuquerque for special treatment as well.
Yeah.
Let me give that some thought. And this concept, we should think about that. Is this a concept that makes sense? If so, we should adapt these regulations accordingly. And I don't know if everybody's had a chance to go to Rose Meadows, but if you haven't, it's probably worth driving around to see whether that is that. Because that is what this is, so is that the vision?
Yeah. No. Seeing what I've seen in the other developments by this developer, we're definitely going to need the screening from the townhouses, because I know the residents wouldn't like to see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, just 7 in a row of mostly 6-unit buildings right next to the road. So they're definitely going to need that screening,
Yes,
which is in the regulations, right?
yes.
So
Yeah, that is in the regulations.
or proposed regulations.
Right.
So yeah.
But you are gonna have a row of 7 long garages, so that's just something to think about, the visual impact of that.
Yeah.
That's facing internal to the.
It is.
Yeah.
It won't be visible from Albuquerque. It will be the dominant characteristic for the people who live there.
Yeah.
That is what's gonna dominate their environment.
Yeah, inside of the green space, you're just gonna see a building behind, like a building, and then 4 garages, the backs of them.
Right.
Which, we discussed earlier, the possibility of adding, some screening behind the garages. And we
Right.
might want to codify something along those lines when applicable.
We may. Or it might be so specific that you just deal with it through the site plan review process.
We wouldn't have any, it would be harder to enforce in that situation, probably.
Yeah. We could look at addressing that. And, but at least the through road, the loop road, the garages wouldn't be the dominant thing that you see. So that's a plus. So, all right, let me think about how to play with that a little bit, language-wise.
Like maybe if parking structures become a dominant characteristic of the area, they must have a reasonable reasonable screen.
Something to that effect. Yeah, I'll come up with something that addresses that.
Sounds good.
Otherwise, go ahead.
Then there was the discussion on what do we want to do about the fact that technically the garage structures as proposed are in violation of the proposed regulations, because as we interpret our definition of the internal roadway, that's still an internal roadway. So I think
That's right.
So for that, yeah, I think just having the option, like have language in the section that defines that it must be in the rear, we could say with exceptions when when the rear is visible from a primary roadway, maybe?
That's one way, or the other way is creating a tier of roads so that this loop, I'll call it, is really a primary access road, and those are secondary access, so that might be a way of addressing that. 'Cause it really is only people who are going to those particular units, whether they live there or are visiting those people who are going to be on those ways, whatever we want to call them, as opposed to that bigger loop. So what you will see visually is very different, because the way this is positioned, there are no garages that are fronting that roadway at all.
Yeah.
So that's where kind of that idea of maybe calling it a service road, or a secondary access road comes into play. That also then takes care of the issue of where the buildings front necessarily, because they wouldn't front that road. But that's, again, I can wiggle around that.
Okay. Yeah, either way could work.
Yeah, I'll come back with something, maybe I'll come back with some options that we could look at. Kind of moving along, not a lot more changed here, except one of the things that we did question under our number 7 was a minimum of 40% of the front yard area between any building or, public road, street, et cetera, needs to be green space. So I did not measure. I was looking at Corning Farm as an example, and I don't think they meet 40%.
I can try to measure on the GIS.
Yeah, so my eyeball was, I was gonna go back to the site plan and I just didn't have a chance to do that, but my eyeballing it was maybe 30, 35, was probably more likely.
Okay, I'm gonna measure. It'd be easier if they, it'd be easier if they were perfectly aligned with the direction that the GIS.
And then also on the sides, what you consider part of their front. So that's just something to think about, that requirement, but I do want to go out and take a couple of examples of what we don't want, because there's a few townhouse developments that I've seen in Nashua where the entire front is just paved right up to the buildings. It's all either walkway or parking, the entire frontage, and that I don't think is quite what we want.
I just
See?
did the very rough math, and it's around 27%.
27%,
Right
okay.
now. So you said, what was it in the right?
So right now, most of the guidelines I saw were at 50%. I put it at 40 because I didn't think 50 was realistic. If you look at something like a Corning Farm and you think that's enough, then maybe we drop it to 25, maybe we make it 30. Those are things we could think about. And then otherwise, in terms of the layout for the non-residential buildings, really pretty honestly, what we saw here does comply. We don't see a lot of detail here, but realistically, single row of parking, there'll be sidewalk access. The buildings are, of course, going to face 3A, et cetera, so that seems really pretty consistent. And we didn't seem to have a lot of discussion there.
Regarding the coloring, one thing that was brought up in a prior meeting was, are we okay with all gray? Because what you have proposed is discouraging overly vibrant colors. But what do we think about all gray? Because that's a more modern trend that some people like and some people dislike.
Well, brown. We do brown. It's not a bright color.
Is your question that just the use of gray, or that the building is all one color?
Just all gray, or shades of gray. I guess the lack of any color.
It's monotone.
Yeah.
But that falls under the neutral palette. We talked about neutrals,
Yes.
right? So, gray's a neutral.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but think
so-
about,
Warm and a cool, but I think during the site plan, where you With a site plan, you look at elevations, you look at what they're using for siding and their coloring, I mean, you know, that, we can weigh in on that to a great degree. I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a question of how specific do you wanna get.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Here-
particularly where there's like 6 units, I understand your concern that, you know, you're gonna have all one color of any color is gonna be, you know, screams, hey, it's
Right.
big and,
Yeah.
but, you know, so anything you can do during that process of going through and making sure that they provide us those drawings and like, really, this is how it's gonna look,
Right.
so we can offer feedback on that. That's, basically not approve it until it's the way we want it.
Yeah, I mean, going back to Corning Farm, although those are residential, there is that kind of, there's a theme, but there is variation in color from one to the next. If those were all gray, that would look really, yeah,
Yeah, it would make them look bigger.
and,
because of the-
and much blander.
Yeah. And speaking of consistency and variation, one regulation that some towns have that we do not have is a variety, like not having every building be the same size. I think I've heard that some towns will require some buildings to have fewer units than others to add just variation and reduce them just cookie cutter look. And I don't know if we would want to consider that or not.
I don't know. I guess that's,
Yeah.
the ones that I've seen more commonly, wanna see a variety of housing types. I haven't seen too many that say,
And peaks.
well, we do have that in our design guidelines. We talk about breaking up facades.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen anything but I could certainly look for some examples if that's something we wanna pursue, to change the number of units. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion on it. I-
What is, like, I know Mr. Chabot like 6 units.
Yeah.
What is that Corning, is it? 4? Is it-
Except for the one that he wanted to build in replacement of the 2 units from the building that was torn down.
Yeah.
That's 2.
That's
And when he was talking about that, he mentioned that some towns require different size, like the 2-unit building to break up the 4-unit buildings.
Right.
Yeah.
That's where I heard it from.
I would agree, like, you want some some variability. I would say maximizing, or maximum number of units should be like 6, because we don't wanna see a row of
Yeah.
12.
Right. I think we had that in our
Yeah, and I
ordinance.
think, you know, the cost factor, I mean, if he were sitting here, he would tell you that the cost factor of the more end units you have, the more windows, the more, you know,
Yep.
Yeah.
it drives up the cost,
Right.
so,
Right.
yeah.
Plus the cost of, each unit has, well, each row of housing has a septic, so you gotta maximize what you can get out of the
I
septic.
like capping it at the number of units in a
Yeah, in a row.
everything, so
More
that
than-
we
yeah.
don't, so that they don't attempt to go for maximum efficiency that for our side might.
Also, they look like Maryland brown houses,
Yeah.
row
We
houses.
did remove the 6-unit limit from the from the ordinance.
Yes.
Which opened up the possibility of that 16-unit building.
So we could limit, you know, rows of townhouses to rows of no more than 6, if
Yeah.
we think that makes sense. And encourage a mix. Like, you know,
Well,
that
one
way
good-
it's encouraged.
Yeah, one good thing about the way they design these ones is they do offset the units. So if you look at
Yeah.
it, there's the end units, which are at one size, and then it looks like they shrink it and offset 2 groups of 2 in the center.
Right. And there is one group of 4, and obviously a 16-unit garden style, and there might wind up being another group of 2 or 4, if that.
In the back.
Yeah, where that storage shed is, because I think if I heard correctly, I think we're 94 and 96 here, and 100 are allowed, so.
Yeah.
100.
88 and 94, yeah.
But I can put in some language around that, and we can see what that looks like.
As long as there's sufficient square footage in the commercial part to.
That's right.
offset the residential units.
Yeah. So So moving in, I did swap out one of the examples. I still don't love it, but I might get a better one. I'll probably get a couple or two, but this is, the one I stuck in there is a small commercial building in Nashua. It was actually built as a bank, and it's currently a dentist's office now. But it hits the points architecturally of what's called for in the regs.
I was driving through Hudson and I was looking at the Walgreens location that closed, and that would not be allowed in our regulations because I'm assuming the roof is definitely a flat roof.
Correct.
But the facade they have on the sides is definitely pretty good for a flat roof building. And they could probably build an even more bland building in the non mixed use part of Litchfield. I don't know. I forget exactly what regulations but I think we don't have a design standard for the rest of the commercial.
We do.
We do. Okay.
In our site plan regs, we've got pretty good ones.
And
So-
what do they do regarding facades of commercial buildings?
Which is also one of the reasons why I didn't go into as much detail here.
Yeah, good to not duplicate.
To not duplicate, so just bear with me while I get to. So they are pretty detailed. So getting into, this is section 120.13.5, building massing forms and pedestrian scale. So first of all, we say in cases of non-residential facades 50 feet or more in length, all of these things kick in. Variations in color and or texture, variations in roof form and height of roof elements, emphasis on the rhythm and pattern of windows, columns, and other architectural features, enhanced definition of each floor. I'm not going to go read it all verbatim. Avoidance of blank walls at ground floor levels through the use of windows, trellises, wall articulation, arcades, materials, etc. That would also apply to the garages, by the way, because they're more than 50 feet. They're 70.
Yep.
Use of materials, manufactured units, blah, blah, blah. Use of significant architectural features, including but not limited to columns, pilasters, canopies, porticos, awnings, brackets, arches, etc. Use of windows that reveal interior amenities, use of front porches and entry porticos in multifamily residential development. Use of complementary and cohesive yet varied colors and materials to distinguish individual multifamily units or structures from one another, et cetera, et cetera. Roof lines shall not run in continuous planes of more than 50 feet. Flat roofs are discouraged. All roofs shall provide adequate overhangs for pedestrian activity, et cetera. Windows and entries have to cover 60% of the area of the facade. We've run into some issues with that one. All building entrances shall be clearly defined and highly visible with a minimum of 3 of the following details. And we go into porticos, canopies, overhangs, etc. Building rooftop air conditioning and heating equipment has to be screened. And then there's building design review, etc. So we really do have pretty detailed, so you couldn't build that building in Litchfield without waivers. So I didn't replicate all of that language here because it would be redundant, but there are some things there that we don't require that we do here, such as there we talked about variation in color. Here we discouraged bright color and went with the pastel palette. Here, while there, flat roofs are discouraged, here pitched roofs are required. So there are some additional requirements here.
Yeah, it makes sense because
Yeah.
it's next to residences.
Yeah, but there's a lot that we have, not to say we couldn't look at those and think of things that we might want to change, but they are pretty good. I mentioned that window requirement because we have wound up giving waivers from that because that's a hard one to meet. That's really meant if you're a retail store.
Yeah, the ones we've had to give waivers for have mainly been warehouses where windows are messing with storage.
Exactly, exactly. If it's a retail storefront, people want the windows, otherwise they tend not to.
Yeah. Do those regulations only apply to the front, or does it apply to all sides or a certain amount of sides?
I guess I've always looked at them as assuming that it's kind of the front or what's visible. I don't recall ever applying them to the rear of a building.
Yeah, because that would be a weird place to require windows. and everything.
It's been the facades, so, yes. But yeah, again, so I guess kind of look at those alongside these, know we have those, and these we have supplementing. The next area that we made changes is landscaping requirements. We had some conversation around the minimum tree. This is on subsection 2, street trees. And I think there was a consensus that the 30 feet is fine because it applies to both sides. That really means every 60. But there was some concern about putting in language that made it clear that we're saying trees should have the way it was trees should have a minimum of 50 square feet of permeable area for growth. So I put that in now as a minimum, and then added the sentence, notwithstanding the aforementioned guidelines, tree planting, including site and species selection, planting practices, and early tree care, should follow industry-recognized best management practices. So just kind of in tooling around, I found that there are a couple of different ones that seem to be referenced, like the Arbor Society, if that's the correct term, has one. There's a couple of other ones that seem to be cited, so I figure I didn't want to call out one. I did see some example regulations that specified one, but I don't know enough to say that's the better one, so I figure there's recognized best management practices out there, follow them. And then that's really it, other than I found some nicer rain garden examples, and I put them in. And that's it. So that's what I did so far. But I can, kind of based on this evening's conversation, I'll have another go at it and bring it back maybe for our next meeting.
Sounds good. Anybody have anything else? It looks good.
All right.
Well, thank you, Jay.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
I can dive into parking if you'd like. Parking.
A lot of changes in this one.
Yeah, so I'm going to start at the end, and then kind of work our way. Then I'll go back to the beginning, and just so you can kind of. I made a lot of changes here. Most of those changes we don't need to make. We could make, but we don't need to make. The ones that I really wanted to highlight that we either have to change or really, really should change starts on the bottom of page 3 under multifamily residential developments. So the have to change is that state law changed. So it has now limited our ability to require, for what we can require for minimum parking. And I will note as a caveat, it could change again because there is another bill pending that will further restrict our ability to require more than one parking space per unit. So, and I will say we have more wiggle room here, but the way it is now is that there's all kinds of little caveats, but essentially developments that are 10 unit, multifamily developments that are 10 units or more, you can't require more than 1.5 parking spaces per unit. You can for developments that are less than 10 units, but that doesn't make any sense to me. Why would you make small ones have more? So I just went straight up with the 1.5.
I think the only argument I can see towards larger ones requiring less is because you have the probability of the utilization being at 100% will be lower because you have more people there that may not be using it, so you might have some extra spaces for them to use for the people who have more vehicle needs, I guess.
I think that's true, and that is an argument. And we also have different requirements for studio and for workforce. So I just went with the straight 1.5. We certainly could vary it.
Proposal here is at 3, you said?
His is at 4. He
4?
provides a garage
Three-
space
three
and
plus
3.
garage.
And that is unusual. Most developments don't do that.
Yeah. And he says
Um,
that even then 3 is not enough on some days, or 4
Well,
is not enough some days.
As always, it's especially true in any place if people use their garage for stuff. Right? That takes away a space. But nevertheless, I went with that. Again, for smaller developments, we could choose to require more. So that's just something for us to think about. And of course, again, these are minimum requirements. Anyone can provide more parking if they wish. It's just saying what you can't do less than.
Yeah, the worst case scenario, a development won't have a lot of parking, and the residents, the people who are looking at potentially living there, are gonna see there's not a lot of parking, and they can decide whether or not they want to live there or not.
This is true.
Probably just discourage people with lots of vehicles.
I think that's probably true. Well, especially in a community like Litchfield, it's really unlikely anybody's going to develop to this standard. Realistically, you're gonna have a hard time renting your unit.
Yeah, it's like a
if
lot
you're-
of, even in these types of units, I would definitely expect a good chunk of people to have 2 vehicles if you have 2 adults.
Absolutely, and people will not want to rent that unit if they can't
Yeah.
have parking
One
for.
parking
Yeah,
spot.
I mean, absolutely. But nevertheless, again, the only place we can require more than 1.5 is for small developments. So we don't have that latitude above.
Does that include 3-bedroom?
It's per unit,
Okay.
not per by. Yeah, it doesn't break it
3-bedroom one
down.
may need even, the probability of them needing more than 1.5 is even higher.
Right. So, and again, the statute has more nuances in it. I just tried to go simple. But we can, we could break it down further if we wished. The next was changing our dimensional requirements. 9 by 18 is a standard parking space. Some places require 10 feet wide. Nobody requires a 12-foot wide parking space. So why we do only for residential, I don't know. I just took it to 9. It didn't make sense to me. And some of these we're changing based on our experience in reviewing a site plan where we realized that we had parking requirements for multifamily that we haven't been applying because we didn't even realize we had them. So that was one of them, the 12-foot wide parking space.
Do you know how wide they were in the Rose Meadows development?
I don't know, but if I would guess 10, 9 or 10. Again, that's really standard, so it's just nobody does 12 feet. I don't know why or where that came from, so I propose striking that. Also, there's this strange, my battery. Why should my battery be running low? I'm plugged in. I guess I better hurry. So, again, there's this adequately sized garages. Then there's this, in parentheses, minimum by 20, minimum 24 by 20 qualify for required parking. So again, why are we requiring a 2-car garage? Either you can have no garage, but if you have a garage, it has to be a 2-car garage. That just made no sense. And again, that was something we were not applying. Most townhouse type units have a 1-car garage. So I struck that. And then there's this weird where one-way roads less than 24 feet, blah, 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 you can't accommodate. I don't even know what that is. I took that out. I suggested taking that out. And again, we can't require more guest parking anyway, so that was weird. And then finally, in the very last sentence, shared driveways are encouraged, particularly for townhouses. This is a parking section. It's not about driveways. We have another driveway section, so why having a driveway reg here? It just doesn't make sense. So I propose taking that out. So for the most part, this section is proposing changes to either deal with regulations that we haven't been applying, or complying with statutory change. The next paragraph is basically almost verbatim out of statute. This was another change that required that we consider alternative parking solutions. I think this is a oddly worded requirement. So I didn't really try to paraphrase. I just said, just took it out of the statute and said, this is what we're required to do. It is a alternative that is really aimed at urban areas, and essentially what this would be is if there's public parking, you
Yeah,
can
okay.
say,
We're gonna bus people in?
yeah. The only place where I could see this actually applying is in one of these mixed-use developments where somebody's proposing shared commercial residential parking under the argument that there'll be an offset. That could be a scenario where we see this, but this isn't something that can really, I think, will come into play. But it's mandatory, it's in statute, so I just stuck it in there verbatim.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't seem to be a thing that will matter much to Litchfield.
I don't think so. So everything else, there's a whole lot of changes I suggested, and we might want to go down this road, we might not, but there's just a couple of themes that you may have picked up on if you went through the tediousness of actually going through this, which I don't expect that anybody did. So the two themes are, one, trying to make our regs simpler, and something that you can actually apply. In almost every case, we have requirements in there that say you need so many spaces per square foot or per this or whatever, plus one space for every employee on the largest shift, which is something that we, most of the time, will never know and can never regulate and can never follow up on. We just don't know. The number of employees changes. Most of the times we see a commercial building proposed, as we saw tonight, where they don't have a tenant yet. So it's just not enforceable. My preference is go by X number of parking spaces per square foot or per whatever, but something that you can objectively determine when the site plan's proposed. So I suggested striking that any based on employee in almost every case, not every case. The other thing is in looking at the parking requirements for a lot of communities, our parking requirements are really high. In some cases, they're really, really high. And they're up to 4 times higher in some cases than what you see in other communities. And it doesn't make sense. So what I tried to do was look at the parking requirements for kind of several surrounding communities and try to get a consensus. Sometimes that's hard to do because most towns also do not have parking requirements nearly as detailed as we do. We have parking standards for almost everything that you can think of, and we have parking standards for things that are never going to happen in Litchfield. So some of them I struck. I could probably strike more. So that's kind of the overriding themes. I wasn't going to go blow by blow. Starting with farm stands and nurseries. One of the things I also tried to do is make them more consistent. What you're going to find is that most of the commercial requirements in here are going to boil down to 1 parking space per 250 square feet. So that's really kind of one of the things you saw consistently. So even farm stands and nurseries, I added and 50 square feet. And again, that's because that's what I'm finding is really common. The other advantage of having more consistency is it means that when you change the use of a building or a unit, which is common, the same parking space requirement is probably going to apply to whoever comes in there next, making life for everyone a whole lot easier. So I tried to do that everywhere. In some places, I didn't, and I might even come back to it. Again, I wasn't going to go through all of these, but as I go down and you kind of glance through them, you can see that that consistent theme of striking the employee and just keeping it where it was because it was high enough where it was. I did change some, again, just kind of trying to see where the trends are. Theaters and auditoriums, for example, I doubled to 6 spaces, and in part, that was just consistent. If people want to ask me about any of these, stop me as I go. But I think it's the same themes that kind of went through here. Swimming facilities, that's just another example of a really weird standard of 1 space per 75 square feet of gross water area. I don't want to calculate that. So nevertheless, I mean, that's just kind of the theme. I'm trying to see if there's a couple of others that really jumped out at me. Grocery store was one. 1 space per 100 square feet is one of those. That's a tremendous requirement for a grocery store.
I guess that's probably one thing that discourages businesses from opening grocery stores.
Yeah, I mean, when you think the size of a typical grocery store, that's just a vast field of parking.
Yeah, and vast fields are undesirable.
They are undesirable. So I almost kind of similar to that theme I mentioned before, that 1 space per 250 square feet is pretty much the theme that you see through here. Trying to think if there's anything else. Again, some of these we're probably never going to see a real hospital. But hey, maybe it will, so I left it in. Bus terminal, I just took that out. We're never going to have a bus terminal. I mean, I can add it back in, but that's just one of those, it's never going to happen. I don't think we'll ever have a marina either, but I did, I think that one can probably go. I left it in.
Unless the river floods.
Unless the river floods. And then we have a line in here, AG, and that was, and other commercial uses. So that's just where I added multi-tenant shopping centers and other commercial uses. And again, I just said that's going to be, the way we have it now is per 1,000. So I just said 4 per 1,000. Again, that's the 250. And what that means is that if you have a multi-tenant shopping center, you have a standard for that center. As those uses change, they don't have to come back to the planning board. They can just change, unless they're categorically changing to like a restaurant, in which case that's got a very different standard. But it's just multi-tenant shopping centers need to be able to change their tenants pretty readily. So I think one standard makes sense. I kept in the standards after that for schools. I hemmed and hawed taking it out. Because certainly these regulations don't apply to public schools. The only place they would apply is private schools, but actually we do have a private school. So I left it in.
Yeah, regarding schools, like I've seen some of the schools in our town, and like St. Francis, for example, the parking is very, very underutilized, and it's utilized. A lot of it's utilized for recreational space. It's blocked off from cars.
I could see that. Yeah.
Yeah, and with the school building for the charter schools, the Academy for Science and Design in Nashua, they recently moved buildings, and it's a huge former office building that they changed to a school.
Yeah.
And it's way more parking than they need. Whatever office regulation from the 1970s is way more than is necessary for a school.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I know that school. So again, we can take a look at these further, but that's kind of the theme. I'm trying to see if there's something else out there.
Oh, you have daycare centers.
We do have daycare. So daycare was an example of where I did leave it in per per employee, and the reason I did is because for a daycare center, that's who's parking. I mean, it's the employees, and how big they are really varies, and most of our daycare are home daycare. Again, that could change, so I did leave it in this case. Because you're gonna know the number of employees, because state law governs the ratios, and so you're gonna know what that is. So that one I left in.
And how many children do daycare centers typically service or take care of?
Oh, they can vary widely. I mean, like the YMCA in Merrimack has an enormous daycare center. I mean, there's certainly at least a couple hundred kids there. I think there's more than that.
Oh.
So
I wonder, so the one I propose is 4,800 square feet.
it wouldn't be that many kids.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. You couldn't fit that many in.
But it would certainly be a decent number of kids. It'd be, far more than a home daycare.
Square foot per child.
30 to 50 kids.
Yeah,
Imagine.
yeah.
That would be really tight.
And there will be
Couldn't make money
employees.
if you didn't
Yeah.
get that many kids in.
So yeah, if we say there are 24 kids, then we would need 4 parking spaces plus 1 for every employee, that's probably like 6
Yeah,
parking spots. It's not a lot at all.
It's not a lot.
Ratios vary
It's not a
based
lot.
on the ages of the children. So
Yeah.
for younger children, you need more staff.
right.
Yeah, and then the main challenge point is the hours when parents are dropping off and getting their kids. And I don't know how many do at the same time. Worst case scenario, you end up with a line.
Worst case scenario, you wind up with a line and you want to be able to accommodate that line. With daycare, there's usually a window. Everybody doesn't come at one time. Like public schools, or regular schools, right? There's an actual start time and an end time.
Horrible lines.
Right. Usually it's, you have to pick up your kid by 6, and some are picking them up at 4, or anywhere in between. So you could have your peak times, but it's going to be more staggered than in a regular school. And you're usually not staying long. It's,
So
Are we doing separation of church and state? Is that why churches was crossed out?
yes, we can no longer regulate them.
Okay. That's all, okay.
So, yeah.
You can't specify how many parking spaces of a church, if someone wants to build a church.
We
We
can't
can't specify
requ-
that they
we-
need so much parking?
We can't require them to come to site plan review.
does that include non-church uses within the same building?
Well, that's an arguable point. We would have to decide whether or not it's a religious use.
What about, like, St. Francis, for example, this school portion? Is that a religious use if it's a Catholic school?
I would probably want to get another opinion on that. I don't think I want to decide that right now.
Yeah.
But I would assume that, like St. Francis, the school, we would regulate them, and they have come in for site plan review.
We have the other church there,
Tabernacle?
Tabernacle, and.
Yes. But at this point, my understanding is churches are exempt from site plan review.
But is that new? Because we did
Yes.
a church about 10 years ago over in Londonderry, and they built it from scratch, and
I'll double check, but yeah, I think it was a couple of years ago that there was a change in statute. And there's just been a case that I read about today or yesterday, where a town issued a cease and desist order to a church for failure to get site plan review, and that was struck down.
I would imagine though that, well, I mean, this is beside the point, but I would imagine that they'd want to be good neighbors and, with traffic flow and everything else, it's a communal effort.
Oh, I would think so. And again, if we're
But you're saying
concerned,
we can't dictate it, I guess, is what you're saying.
yeah, I don't mind putting it back in. But yeah, end of the day, if somebody wants to open up a church, we're not gonna be able to tell them
We could
they
say
can't, 'cause they don't have enough parking.
recommendations.
Instead of saying specifically churches, can we say,
Well, it's like an auditorium, basically.
yeah, nonprofit education, something along the lines that it falls into the same bucket?
Well,
And for, in that regard, schools as well? You know what I mean?
yes, what we can do. Well, schools, I think we've got a standard for schools, so I think we keep that.
Okay.
So what we could do, because it's a good point, if we're gonna put churches back in, we wouldn't wanna call them churches anyway. Because that's rather,
Places of worship.
that is rather limiting, but we have another,
Tax exempt.
places of worship, but we have another.
Well, I suppose someone could put or a room within their
Good.
area or home or whatever, and then that would, yeah, dictate parking,
Right.
so we wouldn't want, yeah.
So we,
Okay.
we have, E on page 1, which is private clubs or function halls. We could expand that to be private clubs, function halls, places of gathering, et cetera.
Places of gathering, yes,
Yeah,
that's a
and
good
then,
one.
all right, I'll put that in there.
Yeah, private clubs, function halls, or other places of gatherings. That's, yeah, I like that.
Such as a town hall meeting room?
You can require life and safety, by the way, so that is still,
Supersedes everything, so we don't have to, yeah.
We don't have to follow rules.
But,
The municipality doesn't have
right?
to follow
'Cause you
those,
don't want people to
that's
die.
right.
So,
Yeah, we don't have to follow those rules. So that's it. Obviously, you know, people might wanna take a closer look. I'll make that change, and I'll dive a little more into see if we wanna do a little more breaking up of the multifamily residential, requiring more parking where we can. I could do that. And otherwise, that's it.
can I ask you a question on golf courses?
Sure, I probably
It
don't have the
says,
answer.
Not the part that you changed or anything, but the 4 spaces per hole plus 50% of the space otherwise required for any accessory use.
Right,
Is that what you're referencing, like the clubhouse?
yes.
Okay, got it. So if there's retail in there, a restaurant, things like that.
Yeah, a function room that people rent out for like weddings or whatever.
Okay, all right. That's what I thought, I just
Yeah.
wanted to double check.
We have automobile wash facilities. I think we're gonna have, I believe the gas station is gonna have it.
No.
Or are they changing that? Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're not. There's other things I thought of taking out. I don't see, well, one, that's kind of archaic language, but it is what it is.
M, tennis and other racquetball or handball courts. Does that
Yeah.
cover pickleball?
Oh, yeah, maybe pickleball has a different requirement because it's a higher, higher occupancy load. There you go. I wonder if that's out there. I thought about taking out laundromats because I can't see anybody putting a laundromat in, but
No.
I didn't.
What about storage units? Do you have storage units?
We do,
Mini warehouse?
yep, mini warehouse. It's like, there's so much in there. It really is.
Yeah.
So again, we might want to take a look at it, think about it. I'll make a couple of tweaks to this and we can look at it again. We should probably hold off on doing anything final, until we see what passes the legislature on residential parking, because if that changes, but that's gonna be June, that'll be happening within the next 6 weeks anyway, so. Or sooner. Well, those bills passed the House, so they're now,
They're in the
so
Senate.
they're in the Senate, so, we should know soon.
So do you want a work session on the 20th, May 20th, or not? Or move it to June?
Do we have anything on that?
So,
Conceptual gas station.
So we could do the 20th, or we could do June, if ever people, why don't we do June, because, well, unless we feel that we wanna move more quickly on the
But you won't know till
for
June.
the mixed use.
mixed use,
guidelines,
yeah, let's do it,
Not-
let's put it
You
on.
can't enforce it if he brings it to us before we enact it.
That's right. So we could certainly do that then, and we could
The 20th?
hold,
20th?
we could do the mixed use guidelines on the 20th, and then we could maybe hold off on parking until June and see what happens.
That makes sense. Well, thank you very much for.
Absolutely.
So that brings us to committee reports. Any reports from any committees? Jay, did you want to talk about Thursday?
Thursday. Oh, yeah. So I'm not sure who has signed up, but we do have our annual forum Thursday at La Belle Winery at 5:30. Well, cocktail hour starts at 5:30. Dinner starts at 6:30. Program is at 7:10.
Okay.
And our focus is housing, and I think we've got a good lineup. Data heavy.
Should have had a builder in there.
We actually thought about that, and we were working with the builder, and then we ultimately wound up not getting the builder. But yeah, we thought about that.
Because what, could say, well, why aren't you building these? And they would say density.
Yeah, I know. We had a lot of back and forth on that, because we also know that there's gonna be a lot of, people from the legislature there. We know that there's very strong views. There's a lot of legislation out there, and so we were kind of,
Yeah.
No conflicts.
you want to
You wanna start a
avoid.
fist fight.
You don't want, I mean, it's good to have some level of interest and controversy and discussion. But we thought about that. And planning board members and select board members, and so it'll be an interesting balance. But yeah, that was definitely on our list.
CIP, the Capital Improvement Committee met last night. We had a bunch of interviews of potential candidates for a citizens rep. We're gonna see where that goes. Not much to report on Capital Improvement Committee. I think we finalized, or sort of close to finalizing the schedule, and we didn't have a quorum, so we really couldn't vote on anything last night, but we'll be pushing forward, I think, in, I believe, June. Conservation Commission meeting was last Thursday, in Town Hall. I attended the end of it.
It was the fastest meeting on earth.
It was a very fast meeting, yes, I was surprised.
The vice chairman was leaving town.
Right, exactly. And I know the Lower Merrimack Local River Advisory Committee, I did receive an email, they are looking for a new chair to the committee, and I think they're gonna be having a meeting at some point. I gotta check my email, but, I think we're gonna be meeting at some point, to discuss that. And that's all I have. Jay, you're on the, Economic Development Committee, is any updates on that, or?
The last meeting for this month was canceled.
Okay.
I haven't been able to go to all the meetings, but my understanding is the focus is now just on developing the final report
Okay.
for the selectmen.
That's my understanding, okay. You're on energy? Steve?
Yep, energy, we got canceled last week, so should be next month.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything from the Board of Selectmen?
No, really, we had a long discussion with Renee and, Mr. Charbonneau about the gas station and the, sidewalk and crosswalk and, other than that, no, nothing really to report.
I think that's all I have. Approval of the April 15th, 2025 minutes.
I did have a piece of correspondence in there, I think we put it before the minutes, specifically for Letha. Did you see it?
Let me check, hold on.
The alteration of terrain for Liberty Utilities.
Oh,
That, yeah.
oh, okay.
I saw that.
Can we do that under, any other business?
Well, yeah, we don't really have to do anything. I just put it in there for informational.
Yeah, why don't we do that? Well, let's take out the minutes first, and then
Okay.
I'll let, Letha, if you wanna chime in on that, on any other business, we'll certainly do that. Did anybody have an opportunity to take a look at those? Have any questions
Yeah.
for the April 15th?
I think the one note that I think should probably be included is after Mr. Gannon made the comment about the townhouse development with just a daycare could.
Do you know what page you're on?
Yes, that is page 7, paragraph. Fifth one, not including the end of the sentence of the
Okay.
prior page, where Mr. Gannon noted that placing a business such as a daycare in the center of a 200 townhouse development could technically meet zoning requirements. However, such a demographic might strain local resources, especially schools. This could lead to higher taxes over time, undermine the school district's goals of encouraging small business growth, promoting affordable housing, and reducing tax burdens. I think after that, we commented on that and mentioned that the ordinance specifically requires the fiscal impact study. So I think we should include
Put that
in
included in that
yeah,
section.
'cause,
Okay.
you know, if you read this, you may not realize that the ordinance addresses, or tries to address it at least.
Yeah, and you specifically call that out, that there is an
Yes.
ordinance that addresses that,
Yeah.
that concern.
Okay.
So yeah,
We can include that.
the board commented, like, we could have wording like the board
I do
commented.
remember that, yeah.
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 Yeah, the wording could be like the board commented that the ordinance requires a fiscal impact study that should help prevent this situation, or something like that. That's the only change I noticed was necessary.
Anybody have anything else that they saw? Does anyone want to entertain a motion to approve the April 15 minutes as amended?
So moved.
I have a motion by Jared. Do I have a second?
Second?
Second by Russ. Any further discussion? All right, take a vote. All those in favor of approving the April 15th, 2025 minutes of the planning board, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Anybody abstaining?
I abstain.
Okay. So, yeah, motion passes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 0, 1. Okay. Thank you. Okay, any other business? So you said there was something, I'm sorry, in the
There was-
portal.
Just a correspondence from New Hampshire DES regarding
Okay,
Liberty Utilities alteration of terrain permit.
okay. Letha, did you wanna?
Yeah, no, I mean, it
Talk
seemed,
about
I didn't talk about it, I did see it, Joan, thank you for putting it in here. You know, it just reiterates the not disturbing endangered species, that sort of thing, but it doesn't get to the heart of a lot of our questions.
Yeah,
And I don't know, as they'll be back, are they going to go to the selectmen or Liberty Utilities? I think they're working all in the right of way until they get to where they're gonna cross, then they're not in the right of way,
Right, and then they're gonna be in
private property,
private property.
and a big wetland area.
Yeah.
I mean, my suggestion is it's in our best interest to invite them back if they don't suggest coming back. I say we invite them and strongly encourage them to, you know,
They're
come
probably only
back
gonna
and
do
ask questions and reiterate that, for instance, the disturbing of terrain, well, again, what does that mean in your world? When you rip it up, and you know, their response was, oh, we put it back exactly as it was before. Yeah.
They do have to apply for a wetlands permit, which I don't think they've done yet.
They're gonna only come back probably if they're required to, because that's an
Yes.
extra cost.
So,
I'll ask our town administrator if she's heard if they have plans on coming back before at least
Yeah.
the board of selectmen.
I still don't, I still question whether, you know, I know it's 3A. I understand the pinch points in there, they're going on private property, and that really it's out of our control, or so it's been made for us to believe. But I don't think so. It's going through the heart of our town, so, you know, we should be able to dictate what we're willing to work with them on and what we'd like to see changed, even if it's a small thing here or there. I would just like to keep them honest through this process, so that with the disruptions comes some kind of nicety back to our town.
No, I think that's, well put. I agree. Okay. Well, thank you, and obviously we'll get it kept posted on what's going on with this. Certainly, town administrator probably knows a bit more about that, and maybe can provide some insight. Anything else this evening? Jay, do you have anything?
Well, I did find the statute on religious use, if you guys want me to read it.
Why not?
So it is, it passed in 2022. It's RSA 674-76. It's not as straightforward as one might like, but religious use of land and structures. No zoning ordinance or site plan review regulation shall prohibit, regulate, or restrict the use of land or structures primarily used for residential purposes, provided, however, that such land or structures may be subject to objective and definite regulations concerning the height of structures, yard sizes, lot area, setbacks, open space, and building coverage requirements, as long as said requirements are applicable regardless of the religious or non-religious nature of the use of property and do not substantially burden religious exercise.
So if we want to regulate the parking of a church, it should be not just church, but any structure like a church.
No, I don't get that. I get that the only things we can regulate are height of structures, yard sizes, lot area, setbacks, open space, and building coverage.
Yeah, so yeah, no parking and.
But what's the
Landscaping.
emphasis on the residential there? I find that interesting.
What do you mean?
That there, in one of your passages, that one of the sentences, it mentioned residential.
Yeah,
It did?
yeah.
I thought
I
so.
Yeah.
misspoke then.
I heard that.
I was gonna
What's
say,
the
does
beginning?
that mean I can put a chapel in one side of my house and get a tax exempt?
No, it would be religious. So it's,
Maybe I'll do that.
I might have misspoke. It's structures primarily used for religious purposes. So perhaps I
Not
said
residential.
Okay.
Sorry. Religious, yeah. That's it.
Okay, very good. Now you know.
Right.
So yeah, it makes sense to leave that out of the parking then, or out of the parking regulations then.
Yeah.
Okay. Joan, do you have anything else this
No,
evening?
I do not.
Anybody else have anything else this evening? Okay, well, I would, at this time, entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Need a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Travis, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, abstained, motion passes 7-0. Thank you for joining us this evening, and we will see you on May 20th. Have a good night.